The arrow said it plain. West wall. Moonrise. Astrid's hand finds the rope. Above the slats, Helga is the inside operator. Hinge loosened, knife palmed, guard habits mapped. Erik runs the fake transfer bluff. Ivar owns the rafters. Gunnar turns dice into keys. No speeches, just joints, knots and timing. If they pull this clean, the road points straight at Harrowmere and Vidar. If not, Wulfric's spiral gets names to carve. This is episode 6, Moonrise at Rooksgate, written by Brian M. Brumbaugh, narrated by Lily Smith. Let's begin. Moonrise found the west wall colder than the street that fed it. Stone kept the days chill the way a poor man keeps bread, carefully, without sharing. The dike ran like a sentence under the wall. The cartwright's offcuts leaned where Astrid remembered. The rope hung as promised, braided and sure, the fisher's mercy knot sitting in the moonlight like a quiet thought that had decided to be useful. They came in small 4 people who'd practiced being unremarkable, until it felt like a second spine. Ivar went up first, testing the wood. One plank creaked a wrong story, he eased it free. Erik took the place a leader takes when the work begins, close enough to move, far enough to see. Gunnar leaned on a cart shaft like a man judging lumber. Astrid stood where the rope said begin. The wall's slats showed nothing. Then, eyes. Green doesn't glow, not really. It remembers light differently. Astrid saw the color the way someone hears their name in a crowd, sudden and inevitable. The rope tightened, Helga's hand. Astrid wrapped it twice around her forearm, set a foot, and climbed. Halfway up, a fingernail tapped a slat, one long, one short, their old signal. Breath stuttered, steadied. The plank shifted, and Astrid slid through. The crawl space was tight, heavy with dust and shallow breaths. Helga's hair was tied with a strip of rag, rope burns ringing her wrists. Her eyes weighed Astrid in 2 heartbeats. They didn't waste a second. Foreheads touched, one breath, steel on stone, and Helga's mouth found the smallest soldier's smile. Later Helga whispered. Feet, Astrid answered. Helga showed the hinge pin she'd left ready, and the spoon-honed bone blade she wore like faith. Rounds? Astrid asked. Master of Keys drinks himself stupid. Guard yawns by the 3rd laugh. Gawain sleeps. The other bores himself cruel. Bored men make noise, Astrid said. Then, we'll give them the right time, Helga replied. Outside Erik's knuckle brushed timber, soft, a moth. Helga eased the hinge pin free. Below the yard sat quiet in shabby triangles of lantern light. Helga squeezed Astrid's arm. Ragna, she said, we don't leave her. Argue, and I plan without you. Astrid didn't argue. Where? Left hold. Ankles bad, hands good, head better. She keeps the young ones from breaking, then she's ours. The plans stood up and moved. Gunnar worked the dice plank with easy charm. Ivar melted into the rafters. Erik walked in with a lead tag and a bored man's face. The bored guard waved them through. Inside, Helga and Astrid slid through the loosened plank. The left-hand door opened on the stink of straw and fear. The guard barked hands, but Helga moved, quick, silent, and efficient. Thumb to nerve, shield rim to knee, his body folding without protest. Bolt, Ivar whispered above. Gawain woke to the wrong sound, blinked, and went under, when Ivar's haft tapped his jaw like a polite suggestion. Ragna, Helga said, voice warm as bread. The shadow that rose was a woman with a limp, steady eyes, and hands ready. Astrid cut her bonds. Can you climb? I can try. If not, you look like you still have backs. Gunnar grinned. Ours were worried they'd go to waste. They left quietly, the yard seeing only chores. At the gate, Gunnar spun a tale about a fish embarrassed by a priest's hair. Astrid slipped by unnoticed. The culvert court took them in. Ivar warned of 2 at the gate. Gunnar followed, yawning news. They dropped through the grate, Ragna first, Astrid close behind, Helga and Erik last. Through the culvert, into Marsh. Mud clung, reeds complained, but they pushed on. Aldith's hut opened at the signal taps. Relief met them inside. Under, Aldith said. They laid low. Helga mapped Harrowmere yard with precision, cranes, gates, men and their habits. They ate, knotted cord and prepared. When the night leaned toward grey, they stepped out. The river breathed cold. Somewhere, Wulfric's spiral found the rope knot, sniffed its cut end and tucked the scrap into a pouch. Astrid walked beside Helga. For 20 paces the world forgave everything. Feet, Helga said, no longer a lesson but an oath. Feet, Astrid answered. Aldith's hut held its breath the way small rooms do when there's more story in them than air. Fish racks creaked in the wind, the river nosed the marsh, and decided to forgive it for another hour. Helga sat at the table with her wrists banded by rope burn, and her eyes sharp, as if someone had honed them on brick. Astrid took the bench beside her, and didn't take her eyes off her mother's hands, calloused, nicked, competent as ever. Erik stood where doors liked to have him, filling the jam without blocking it. Ivar owned the shadow above the rafters. Gunnar had discovered a stool he claimed was built exactly to his measurements, and bullied it into agreeing. Yard first light, Helga said, as if finishing a sentence she'd started years ago. Harrowmere runs on whistles and pride. Pride's easy to break, whistles are trickier. Map it, Erik said. Helga pulled a charcoal stub from Aldith's hearth shelf and started drawing on the table the way people draw on tables when the table doesn't belong to them. Gate here, a square. 2 towers but they're lazy. Foreman's loft here, a rectangle. Pitch kettles along this run, a line with little teeth. Capstan. Pull sticks in cold you can make it sing wrong with a wedge here. Tap. Timber stacks, wedged and cribbed. Loosen the low side and they slide if you smile at them. Don't kill anyone who didn't buy that chance. Which stack? Ivar asked. Helga marked one with a cross. This. It screams loudly enough to make a brave man reconsider a hallway. And Vidar? Astrid's voice found her quietly, as if it had been waiting in her mouth until it could be spent correctly. Saw gang, Helga said. Outer run. Rib still doesn't love him, he hides it by singing a beat slow. Shift bell at grey light. He'll pause to rub his side when the bell lies about being morning. He always has. The charcoal paused. He's alive. No one let out breath. They didn't need to hear it. The word hung anyway. Gunnar scratched his beard with a noise like a rake in straw. Guard with a gambling debt. Helga's mouth tilted. Gate man named Erik. She wrote it next to the square. Loses at bones to the foreman's nephew. Doesn't like losing, likes the part right after losing when a friendly stranger gives him mercy more than coin. Says he'll quit tomorrow. Means it for a full minute and then doesn't. Gunnar nodded, content. My kind of music. Rolls, Erik said. Not because he needed to assign them, but because saying them out loud ties knots you can't forget. I flash the tag and talk official until the gate yawns. Gunnar buys Edric's good sense for 5 minutes. Ivar lives on the roofs, and leans on wedges and doors from above. Astrid leads inside for Vidar's lane with Helga on her shoulder. We don't start what we can't finish. If someone has to sleep a while, it's joints, not throats. Aldith slammed a pot on the coals like she was agreeing with violence using soup. And nobody brings soldiers to my door on purpose, she added. On accident then, Gunnar said. A different art. Seal ghosted in, hair damp with river truth. He put a clay pot of chalk on the table and a bundle of rag-wrapped something. Safe doors, he said. I'll mark them with, not spirals. His eyes flicked to Astrid, and he drew 3 quick twigs in the air, the cocked hat arrow Vidar liked to leave on stone. That one. Good, Erik said. Silent and personal. Seal pushed the rag bundle toward Helga. Bow, he said, hunting ash. My uncle's. It's warped a finger only. Pride and apology wrestled in his voice. Helga unwrapped it and smiled in a way arrows understand. It'll do. She looked at Astrid. String? Astrid's hand moved without asking her to. The little coiled length she'd stolen from the warehouse, Helga's string, came out from under her tunic like a fish rising. Helga took it and breathed on it once the way people breathe on embers. She looped and braced and strung the bow smooth, one knee pressed into wood, one hand settling promise into the stave. The bow bent and liked the work. "Glove?" Helga asked. Astrid produced it too. The crease at the third feather groove was her mother's memory. Helga slid the glove on and flexed. The leather remembered her. She hooked the string and let it kiss the pad of her finger. Check, check again. Aldith set out bread and a stew that had decided to forgive fish for being fish. "Eat," she ordered. "Your bodies fight better when they believe you still like them." They ate. Plans breathe better on full bellies. After, Helga took Astrid into the narrow yard behind the hut, where a plank fence pretended to hide secrets and mostly hid the wind. She set a broken cartboard against the fence at knee height, and drew a chalk circle 3 fingers wide. She stood with Astrid, shoulder to shoulder, and made their bodies rhyme. "Urban arrow is not field arrow," Helga said softly. "You won't have time for wind songs and distance guesses. You'll have corners and seconds. So, angle first, feet here." She nudged Astrid's boots. "Hips honest, shoulder low, elbow points at what you own. No high arcs, you'll wake every idiot within a street. Short draw, close target, push the arrow through cloth and a pinion. And if you can't see clean, you don't shoot. Heroes who shoot blind kill friends." Astrid nodded. The bow in her mother's hands belonged. Helga shifted it to Astrid's, corrected her grip with one touch, then another. "Anchor," Helga said. "This line, jaw to thumb. Not your cheek, you lie with your cheeks." Astrid drew. The weight found her shoulders in a way that felt like returning a favor. She loosed. The arrow thudded dull into the board an inch off the chalk. Helga's eyebrow performed a tiny sermon. Again Helga said. Astrid set drew loosed. Chalk kissed fletching. Helga's mouth twitched approval but her voice stayed flint. Again, and now from cover. They rehearsed it, half hidden behind the fence board. Lean out, no big show, elbow drives, hand releases, vanish again. Helga tapped the back of the bow after each shot until Astrid's follow-through closed itself without thought. "Targets to take, when you must stop a man without unmaking him," Helga murmured. Front of the shin just above the ankle bone, outside of the thigh 2 fingers down from the hip, bicep when the arm is extended, it turns hands of iron into hands of fish. Astrid sent 3 arrows in a pace and a half. The board read the lesson and agreed. "Last thing," Helga said. She took Astrid's shield, set it on her arm, and laid an arrow along the rim, nock resting against leather, shaft hidden by wood. "Carry one like this when you can. You come out with the shield, they see wood. You come out with arrow, they don't see long enough to be clever. Your other hand stays a hand. Knots and fingers win fights, bows lose." Astrid smiled despite the night. "You just want me to keep your bad habits alive." "Some habits are heirlooms," Helga said. The smile answered itself, small and unfair. They came back inside to see Ivar and Gunnar turning soot and wax and lead into lies. Ivar had made an impression of the Reeves seal in wax and was pressing tags into it, one after another, with the boredom of a priest making blessings by the dozen. Gunnar had bribed a bit of lampblack into behaving like official ink. Erik watched and practiced 3 faces in a row: man who is bored by authority, man who believes he is authority, man who thinks authority is useful but not interesting. He would wear whichever face the yard asked for. "Runners?" Erik asked. 2, Seal said. "Me and Tola, she owes Aldith fish and the debt is old. We'll mark doors with the hat and scratch 3 tide marks where a lane speaks river. If you need to vanish, follow the tide marks where they run uphill. They mean dry when wet." "Good," Erik said again. He had only a few good words and used them like coins. The room loosened for an hour the way rooms do when people know they have to do something big and it isn't exactly now. Helga sat with Astrid and took her hands, and looked at each place where training and living had decided to make notes on skin. She rubbed salve into knuckles, into the line where a shield bites the palm if you forget to keep your wrist proud. She did not speak while she did it. Neither did Astrid. The space between them said everything that needs saying when two people have borrowed time. Then Helga turned the whetstone, Vidar's, worn thin in the middle, between her fingers and held it out. "You brought it," she said. "I kept it," Astrid answered. "Good," Helga said. "Stones that remember you are better than gods." Aldith cracked the door with 2 fingers and showed them the knight, like a dealer showing a card to someone who pays an attention. "Wulfric's boys are running around town trying to look like they invented anger," she said. "They'll invent competence next week if a miracle does them the kindness. You have till dawn before orders get their boots on." "Then we spend the dark," Erik said. He portioned sleep like a miser, Ivar first, then Gunnar, then him. Helga didn't sleep. She leaned against the wall, with the bow cradled like a child who will never admit to having been one. Astrid tried and failed, tried again, and almost succeeded until the world nudged her awake a sliver before it needed her. Grey came. They ate a heel of bread and the stew that had given up arguing and turned into fuel. Seal brought news that had the rhythm they needed. The foreman's nephew had been up late learning that dice are cruel. Erik had learned that mercy feels like being seen. The capstan crew had cursed the pool yesterday. The cranes creaked a note lower in the cold. "Ropes?" Erik asked. 2 coils, Aldith said, paint on her fingers from marking nets, both tarred. "If you leave them I'll know you died and be offended." "We would never insult you that way," Gunnar promised. Helga checked the bowstring once more, then once again because she's Helga. She tucked 3 arrows under her belt and 1 along her shield, the way she'd taught. Astrid mirrored her without thinking, and then thought about it, and did it on purpose. Erik swept the tag into place on his belt, so it would be easy to see and boring to look at. Ivar vanished in the corner, and reappeared by the lintel because he'd needed to know if it was possible. Gunnar palmed a handful of knuckle bones, the way a priest palms wafers. "Remember," Helga said, "not to scold, to shape. Noise is a tool. Use the yard's noise, not your own. Let hammers hide you, let whistles lie for you. If you have to pick a fight, pick it with gravity." Astrid's mouth surprised her by grinning. "I prefer gravity, it always shows up." "Then we'll invite it," Helga said. They stepped into the hour that is not quite night and not yet day, where mistakes like to root. Frost made a brief argument with the Marsh and lost by mid-pace. Whitcliffe yawned the way towns yawn when they think they've woken before their misdeeds. The chalk kiln coughed. Gulls swore because swearing is what they do to celebrate morning. At the yard's edge they paused where stone thought about being dirt, and the gate thought about being officious. Astrid felt the arrow along her shield, and the stone in her pocket, and the string around her wrist, and the weight of her mother at her side, and decided she had exactly the right number of things to carry. Gunnar peeled off toward a stack of barrels where Edric Stett liked to sulk. Ivar disappeared up the side of a storehouse, gentling a frost-rimmed sill with calloused fingers. Erik squared his shoulders into bureaucrat shape, and walked into the light of the gate, as if hired by it. Helga leaned her shoulder against Astrid's for 1 beat. The contact was a perfect fit in a world that rarely offered them. "Name what is true," she said. "The capstan pawl sticks," Astrid murmured. "The wedge is low. Edric owes us a minute. Vidar rubs his rib at the bell. Gravity's on our side if invited correctly." "And?" Helga asked, a smile scratching at the corner of her mouth. "And we're better at this than the people who think they own it," Astrid said. "Good," Helga said. "Now prove it." They moved as the yard gathered breath for morning. Hammers were already clearing their throats. A crane creaked a note that said cold had opinions. Somewhere inside, a foreman complained about a rope that was not the rope he had asked for. Somewhere else, a man with shoulders like a door sang the second beat of a song and touched his rib as the bell pretended dawn. Erik lifted the tag into the lantern's eye. "Transfer," he said, voice full of the boredom of a man who had never been bored a day in his life. The guard leaned, the world tilted, the plan waited to be spent. And the section held there a half-heartbeat, poised, the smell of tar, the frost's white breath, the tiny scrape of Ivar's wedge, before the yard decided whether this morning belonged to kings on paper, or to a girl with a shield and the people who had taught her how to use it. Morning hadn't fully decided what kind of day to be when they reached Harrowmere yard. Light reached the gate, then argued with smoke. Tar kettles sent up their own weather. Cranes creaked like old men correcting a story. Hammers tapped their warm-ups until the foreman could pretend they'd been going for hours. Erik put on the face that board paper and lifted the lead tag where the lantern could recognize a fellow liar. Transfer, he said. The gate guard, square hat, square jaw, a square debt to dice, squinted like a man trying to remember if diligence was his morning vow. Gunnar drifted closer, close enough to perfume the air with mercy for sale. Knucklebones clicked in his hand like a priest counting sins. Reeves paper? Edric tried because he'd promised someone he'd ask. On the wagon, Erik yawned. Osric will kiss it when he's done kissing himself. Edric smirked, flicked the tag, and opened the wicket. Inside was the cathedral of work, hulls tall as houses, timbers stacked cribwise, a capstan the size of a fat tree with a pawl that thunked like a drunk metronome. Pitch sulked in kettles. Men moved in the rhythm that keeps fingers intact and foremen honest. Above it all, whistles barked when to lift, when to lower, when to be leverage instead of men. Helga touched Astrid's shoulder. Noise is ours, she murmured. Let it hide you. Ivar was already on the roofline, frost dusting his boots. He slid to a rafter over the timber stacks, fingers finding the wedge Helga had marked with charcoal. It had convinced a ton of wood to act polite. He eased a sliver under it, testing. A whisper of pressure answered. He smiled the way cats smile at birds no one else can see. Gunnar drifted toward a barrel near the gatehouse, where Edric's nephew killed mornings with arrogance and dice. Gunnar offered the exact face a drowning man dreams of seeing, a hand, a joke, and a coin that didn't preach. Bones rattled. Relief changed pockets. Erik walked the main lane like he'd been hired to inspect it, brushing the capstan pole and storing its trick for later. Astrid and Helga stayed along the saw runs, where blades sang long, straight sentences. They looked for a man built like a door frame, laughter tight around a rib that argued. Vidar. Hair like fire that knew too much ash, lines from nights without sleep, hands that made work look like a choice. He rubbed his side as the bell lied about morning. He didn't look up. Men who want to live don't. Astrid wanted to call his name loud enough to make the sky listen. Instead, she named the true things Helga had taught her. Vidar's rib hates the bell. The foreman watches lanes, not men. Gravity waits for an invitation. Helga's mouth barely moved. Cockhat, she breathed. Astrid pulled a chalk nub from Seal's pot and scratched a crooked hat on a post where only Vidar would see. She planted herself in his eyeline, shield on arm, arrow low, hips honest. Vidar's eyes found the mark, then her. A grin cracked him open like summer at ice. He didn't look around, he just breathed the family greeting, two shallow, one deep. Helga's hand brushed Astrid's, the signal to count. 1, Ivar's wedge whispered, tipping the stack from I'm fine to I remember falling. 2, Gunnar let the bones fall. Edric laughed, debt forgotten for a minute. 3, Erik flashed the tag to a passing factotum and earned a wide berth. 4, Helga plucked the string once, a note no one had ears for. Now, Helga said. Ivar took the wedge. The stack slid, not a crash, just a heavy groan, a sigh, a quiet thunder. Men shouted without words. The yard tilted, far enough. Helga moved first, shield high. Astrid followed, river to bank. The driver's ash stick rose. Helga's arrow flicked, kissing his thigh. Astrid slammed her shield into the foreman's knee. Both men folded. Vidar, Helga commanded. Vidar dropped the saw, ribs screaming but legs obeying. He reached them, pain trailing behind. Erik stepped into a lane that wanted to be useful to the wrong people, and made it his. The tag at his hip, empty hands, wide shoulders, enough to make guards bureaucratic instead of brave. Gunnar appeared like a moving wall, slid under Vidar's arm, and bore his weight like it had always been his job. "Morning," Gunnar said. "Bit early," Vidar grunted. Ivar dropped from the rafters, spear haft tapping elbows and wrists, until one man decided the ground was safer. "Out," Helga breathed. "West Lane. Edric's minute's dying." They moved. The yard shouted, but the noise had no direction. Edric saw shapes, saw the tag, saw Gunnar's earlier smile, and felt the warm wash of being part of a plan. "Shift change," he barked, and the wicket yawned wide. "Almost free. Hold. Wulfric spiral. Black shield. White spiral cracked. Stillness like gravity." His eyes portioned the scene like a butcher. "Transfer is finished," Erik said, not looking. The tag glinted, bureaucracy's last lie. Wulfric's gaze dismissed Erik, skimmed Gunnar, paused on Helga, then found Astrid. She didn't offer fear, only pity with a bite. He noticed. Men like him always do. "Gate," Edric snapped, louder now, and the wicket widened. Helga's hand lifted just enough. Astrid's shield angled. Gunnar bore Vidar forward. Ivar guided a guard's arm into its own elbow's advice. Wulfric took one step closer. Helga chose. Her arrow hummed over heads and struck his shield rim with a ringing tang, pinning the spiral to its arrogance. "Message delivered, I know you. Not today." Wulfric let it stand, a flag he hadn't chosen. His jaw worked once. "Go," Edric hissed. They went. Street, smoke, seals, chalk hats flashing on doorposts, whistles finding tune, horns answering. "Skiff," Ivar said, pointing with his chin. Erik loosened the line just enough to betray its owner. Gunnar fouled a capstan paw with a gift of dirt. Helga and Astrid moved Vidar through alleys. Astrid took thrown stones and grabs on her shield, Helga's blades silencing trouble without spilling blood. At the dike, Seol appeared. 2 patrols, 8 breaths and they'll see each other, not you. On the 8th breath, they moved. Reeds closed and opened, mud negotiated. The grate yielded to Ivar's hands. They slid into the culvert's wet throat, noise swallowed by water. Vidar breathed like a man dragging a laugh uphill. Gunnar bore steady weight. Erik guarded the rear, listening to the yard's noise fade. They surfaced 3 bends from Aldith's hut. The tide had turned kind. They paused, counted themselves, 5 breathing. 6, if you counted the plan which had earned it. Helga turned to Vidar, foreheads met, breath shared, a thumb against rib. Vidar's grin started stupid, ended honest. "You got taller," he told Astrid. "You got slower," she shot back. "Move," Erik said. "The tide says an hour. The river disagrees." They turned towards Svala. Behind them, Wulfric pulled Helga's arrow from his shield, studied the ragged hole, broke the shaft, and tucked the pieces into his belt like promises. He didn't shout, he began to count. And at the marsh edge, Astrid touched the arrow on her shield and the stone in her pocket and decided, calmly, that the day had gone their way. The horn at the river mouth disagreed, a royal cutter easing across the throat, oars dipping, colours meaning Harold. Erik didn't look at Helga, he didn't need to. "Feet," he said. They ran. The horn at the river mouth bit the morning clean. Not the lazy bray of town or the tar-lung cough of the yard, brass with orders in it. Astrid felt the sound bounce along the dike and count them. They ran the dike anyway. Alders leaned in to eavesdrop. Frost let go of grass 1 blade at a time. Vidar moved like a man arguing with his ribs and winning on points. Gunnar carried the rest of the argument without letting pride hear. Helga trotted a step behind, bow unstrung to look like a stick until not. Erik set their pace to the math of tide and distance. Ivar's eyes did the third job, what's coming from angles you forgot to fear. "See all," Erik said without looking. "Here, came the reply from nowhere, where boys live when towns forget to see them. He sprang from the ditch like Reed had birthed a person. Cutters hugging the bar, oars down. Petty officer thinks shouting makes tide listen. Wulfric's at the quay teaching the reeve how to sprint. You want the boat, you have the breaths. If the river agrees. The river never agrees, Gunnar puffed. Then flatter, Erik said. Cut through Aldith's racks. Seal, loose the net bundle. Already did, Seal grinned, and vanished to become consequence. Svala lay where they'd left her, under reeds, fishnet disguise intact. Erik and Gunnar shouldered her free. Mud claimed the keel, they argued it down. She slid with a shudder that felt like waking. Ivar shoved an oar under her belly at the last lift and levered truth out of suction. Vidar stern bench, Erik said, no heroics, breathe. Gunnar mast, Astrid bow and line. Helga, you're my weather. Ivar. I'm the part of the boat that climbs, Ivar finished, already aboard, checking knots. They launched her into a narrow gut. Water took her and thought about it. The tide was falling, the marsh tugged at the current, like old women pulling gossip. Erik and Gunnar put oars to locks, Svala sighed and remembered how. Catch pull, Erik said, rhythm making fear small. Catch pull. Astrid stood with the bowline, knees loose, eyes on the gut widening into the river proper. The river lay browner than truth, morning light slicking the scum pretty. Beyond, on the low bar, a cutter eased across the river's throat, Harold's pennon hanging damp and mean. Option? Gunnar asked. Option, Erik echoed. We hug Reed to the bend, ride the draw along the eel weir. If the cutter commits to the bar, we shoot the inner run. If they shift inward, we scrape their pride on the sand and slip outside. And if they split us? Ivar asked. Then we remind them discipline rose slower than fear, Helga said. A shout from the quay snapped left. Aldith tipped a rack of drying nets at just the right time. 2 reeves men found themselves married to hemp, gulls and civic duty. Bless her practical soul, Gunnar said. I'll sing her a hymn, he added. Worse for everyone, Ivar muttered. The cutter's coxswain tried to steer 2 orders at once. One clean scrape kissed timbers to sand. Men swore the way men do when they'll later deny it. Now, Erik said. 3 hard and 1 smart. They pulled. Svala leapt as much as honest boats leap. Helga spotted the inner run, current and tide fighting into a fast lane. Left hair, she said, and Erik laid the steering oar into it. They skimmed. Reeds stroked the hull. Astrid felt the lift under her toes, water loving a shape that stopped fighting. The cutter corrected too late, shadow falling in front of Svala like a closing hand. Helga set an arrow. If their bowman thinks he has a day to himself. He did. She proved him wrong. The arrow bit his bicep, his bow dropped, rhythm broke. Joints, Helga reminded herself. Svala burst into the river's throat and drank deep. The cutter came about, elegant and hateful. Outside, Ivar said. Outside kills fools, Gunnar replied cheerfully. We're professionals, Erik said. Astrid leaned into the wind, eyes searching for kelp. A brown head surfaced, blinked, vanished. Riders, Seal's voice carried from the dike. 2, then 4 more, Wulfric's with them. Let him ride, Erik said. Behind, the skiff meant to chase them drifted free, not undone. The cutter corrected again, oars biting unevenly, keel brushing. Not dramatic, just a mistake someone else hadn't made. Svala slid past, low and disreputable. Smile, Gunnar said, but only with your insides. Saltwater muscle grabbed their hull. Erik and Ivar threw the mast up, the sail climbed, lines snugged. Helm? Erik said. I can hold a stick, Vidar said. You never needed help, Erik told him, handing the steering oar. Helga took the forward bench with Astrid, scanning the shoals. On shore, riders spattered the dike, Wulfric a knot of decision. Astrid felt his gaze across the water. Whetstone? Vidar asked, casual. I have it, Astrid said. Wind's clocking, Helga murmured. Low, Erik said. Keep the coast our friend as long as it pretends. A deeper horn blatted behind, a second cutter, learning from the first boat's humiliation. "North," Ivar said. "Teach your necks manners." Vidar brought Svala's nose up. The sail flattened, then consented. Astrid kissed her teeth at a wave. Helga smiled without looking. "You are learning." Wulfric stood in his stirrups, reading angles, pointing. The second cutter shifted to bracket. "Tide's ours for an hour," Helga said. "Then sulks," Erik answered. They pressed north. Reed thin to grass, grass to clay, clay to chalk. Birds flung themselves at the day. Svala hummed, wood content with its work. "Kelp," Astrid said when Erik offered options. "Seconded," Helga said. They slid toward the green-black sheen of weed. The cutter hesitated. Charts hate weeds. It swung wide to keep speed. Svala brushed weed, then lofted silent over a bar. The cutter committed to its cross. Its keel kissed a chalk fang. One oar snapped, the boat yawed, its bowman went for a ride he'd never admit. "Bear off," Erik said. Svala angled north, kelp kissing her goodbye. The headland opened a little arm, just sand enough to beach. 2 minutes to shadow, Ivar said. They beached in a hush, threw the net over the mast and crouched in chalk's cool. The cutters searched water, and found nothing. "Not forever," Helga said. "Rest," Erik replied. "If anyone compliments the plan before sunset, I'll throw you in." "Feet," Vidar murmured, hand on his rib, eyes memorizing his daughter. Astrid breathed. She touched the whetstone, the string, the arrow carved west wall. Moonrise. New letters would come. "Feet," she said, renaming the hours ahead. "Feet," 4 voices answered. They waited. Out beyond the headland, cutters hunted shadows. Wind shifted friendlier. Tide muttered alliances. Somewhere, Wulfric's spiral counted, and found no comfort in the number. When dusk stitched itself into the day, they pushed off in silence. The sea took them like a sentence taking its next clause. 6 episodes in, only 4 episodes left. Let's see what awaits Astrid. Thank you Brian M. Brumbaugh.